Hello, and welcome to this Quest software presentation on the Foglight Experience Monitor. Today we're going to talk about the installation and configuration. The agenda for today is to first cover the documentation, and this is the documentation that's available as well as a video presentation that we'll talk about on that slide. Following that, we're going to talk about the initial installation and network configuration of the Foglight Experience Monitor solution. Then we're going to talk about the collection configuration, which is basically a set of initial filtering that you can do. And then at the end, we're going to talk about the reporting configuration, and this is where we're actually configuring your box to deliver output to the certain stakeholders. The documentation overview, as I mentioned, we do have one video, and this is the Introduction to User Experience Monitoring. And this video will take you through very basics on the approach to user experience monitoring that we use with the Foglight Experience Monitor, and at the end it starts getting into specifics about the product. Next, we'll talk about the Foglight Experience Monitor Quick Installation Guide, and this is the first set of documentation that's available inside the Foglight Experience Monitor box. So when you open the box, you'll see a glossy guide with this banner at the top, and it states the Foglight Experience Monitor Quick Installation Guide. Now, it's available for the 310 and the 710 systems. Most of the time during the trial, though, you're going to have a 310 system. So that's the one we'll focus on today. The second piece of documentation that comes in the appliance box is the Foglight Experience Monitor Getting Started Guide. Now, this is after your initial setup, which is in your quick installation guide, how you can actually configure some things very quickly and get them running so that you're getting reports distributed from the appliance within a very short amount of time. Okay, before we begin, I'm just going to revisit the cabling, which we talked about in the introduction video. When you take your Experience Monitor appliance out of the box, it's going to look like this on the back. Now, this is going to require up to 2, but it supports up to 3 network connections. Okay, you're definitely going to need port number 5 plugged in. Port number 5 is the general interface that we plug into the network that makes the box accessible over the network. So this is one where you'll be able to access the web server or also connect to the box via secure shell. Ports 7 and 8, these are the monitoring ports. So in the introduction video, we spoke about network taps or span ports, and that introduction video actually talks about how you configure those. These are the outputs of those network devices that will actually tap into your network. So basically you have port 5 so you can access the box, and then ports 7 and 8 are the monitored traffic that you'll pump into the back of the box. Now, just a couple other quick ports that you'll need. Port 3 is your monitor port. Port 4 is your keyboard port. Only for the initial configuration, so basically the first 15 minutes of the install process, you'll need that monitor and keyboard hooked up. Following that initial setup where you put the IP address of the appliance in, you'll be able to do all of the other administration through the web browser. And the only other important cable on here really is port number 12, and this is where your power is plugged in. So that gives you an idea of what you need to do in the beginning to hook up all the different connections on the back of the appliance. Now let's get into the initial installation and the network configuration. So as I mentioned, the Foglight Experience Monitor Quick Installation Guide is going to have a banner that looks like this in the top, and there's 2 different appliances that you can get, a 310 or a 710. And the 310 being about half the size of a 710. So you'll see this document is split up into 3 sections: the install, the connect, and the configure. What we're going to do today is we're going to just quickly cover the install and the connect pieces and jump right into the configuration and spend a little bit more time on that. Now, the install and the connect, what they basically do is take you through and tell you where to plug the wires in, and after that they take you through a few configuration screens that give you areas to plug in things like IP addresses and gateways and DNS servers. What you basically set up with a regular computer as you connect it to the network. Okay, now for the collection configuration, this is the final piece of the quick installation guide, and this is where we're actually starting to configure the appliance after it's put on the network. So what you'll see is step 1 starts with the opening of a browser, and then we walk through and we actually log in through the web browser to do all this final configuration piece. What we're going to do now is we're going to break and jump right into a live demonstration of this collection configuration. When I go to my browser and I put the IP address in of the appliance, and this is the one that I configured in the connect phase, I'm going to put that IP address in here and it's going to bring me to the login page on the appliance. Now the default login before anything's configured is admin, and the password is the same. So when I log in as the admin user, it's going to take me through a wizard, and what this wizard will do is it'll ask me for a license, give me the opportunity to enter a license, and in this case you would need to do something here. If you purchase the appliance, it would give you the area to plug in a permanent key. After that it'll go through appliance types, it'll let me configure a time server, and then it'll take me through my final filtering, which lets me pick out what I want to monitor and which servers I want to monitor it on. Let's go through this and I'll just give you a quick idea of what that looks like. So the first one is the license key. Now all of these are node locked, so what you would do is you would provide this host ID back to our licensing department in the case of a permanent install, and they'll provide you a key here that'll turn on the permanent license. For the trials, there's a 90-day license installed, and typically you're only going to need it for 30 days. So there's a little bit of buffer on there just in case. After the license phase, we go in and we have to tell it which type of appliance that we're setting up. Now just to mention briefly, a portal is an appliance that can join a bunch of probes together. So you'll see those two types here. And what you use in those configurations for is generally going to be multiple data centers. So if you're monitoring the same app in 3 data centers, you would put probes in all 3 data centers and then use a portal to roll out the administration of the probes as well as the reporting of the probes. So we go to one place and it acts like one solution instead of having to go all 3 data centers separately. For this trial, we're going to use a standalone setup, and when I hit next, it's going to go through a configuration that sets our database up so that the appliance type is actually configured to be a portal. Now that that stage is complete, it's going to ask me for a time server, and this is not a mandatory step, but if you do want to synchronize this with other monitoring solutions, we do recommend that you enter a time server in so the times are synchronized. Following the time servers, there's 2 more stages. This is the protocol stage. In the protocol stage, you're going to have to tell us which protocols are being monitored on which port. For example, HTTP, the defaults are going to be 80 and 8080. If you have an HTTP web server that you want to monitor that's running on port 7000, you would have to enter 7000 in here and then hit the add button. Now the primary ones that we're going to be monitoring today are going to be HTTP and HTTPS, which is 443. But if you wanted to configure some other ones for basic TCP monitoring, we can do that as well. For example, MySQL is monitoring TCP traffic on port 3306. We're going to stick to web monitoring for today, so I'm just going to make brief mention of that. Now following this stage where you set up the protocols, the next part is to look for which servers you want to monitor. By hitting next, I could go and skip this phase, but what I want to do right now is auto-discover servers. Now what this does is it watches those monitoring ports I showed you earlier on the cable, and it looks for all the traffic that's coming into those monitoring ports as we sit here doing this auto-discover. So what it'll do is it'll let you pick the servers from a list, or you could just manually enter those if you didn't want to go through the auto-discovery. So once it collects your initial servers, you can hit the stop button, and you can just, following that, you can just pick the ones that you want to monitor. So I only want to monitor these 2. So I'll add those to my monitored servers list, and I'll hit next, and that'll let me finish my configuration. So at this point, we've connected the box into the appliance, all the cables are connected, we accessed the web server on the appliance, and we told it what to monitor. So this is the end of part 1. We'll start part 2, as I said before, with the configuration of the reporting for the appliance. Thank you very much for attending.